My name is Emily Harper. I'm 29, and for the first time in my life, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman I can be proud of. Today I'm standing at the window of my own kitchen, in a house that now belongs to me. A house in Greenwood, Oregon. It's small, with creaking floorboards and peeling paint on the windows, but with a solid foundation and soul. This is not an elite suburb, not a place where people are measured by pools and cars, but it smells of silence, mown grass, and hope, the smell of a real home. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. I bought it 2 months ago, after 6 years of working in the real estate industry. No gifts, no inheritances, no successful marriages. Just me, my old Toyota, phones 7 days a week, and endless house screenings. I remember coming home from work at night, falling asleep with my clothes on, and in the morning running back to meet customers with a strained smile and a sore back. But it was all worth it. When I held the keys to this house in my hands were shaking. The realtor I worked with smiled. "Congratulations, Emily. You deserve it." I just nodded, unable to say a word. I was too busy trying to hold back the tears. From happiness, from fatigue, from memories. My father. He would be proud. John Harper was the man who always told me, "Amy, you're capable of more than you think." He was quiet, attentive, and endlessly loving. We often messed around in the yard. He taught me how to use a hammer, turn nuts, and on weekends we painted the walls in the living room, trees, birds, the sun. "This is our forest, just for the two of us," he said. These walls lived, breathed, they were our memory. As long as. He died when I was 18. Heart. One evening, one call, and my whole life turned upside down. I didn't see him, I didn't have time to say goodbye. I just disappeared into the vortex of grief. Mom. She couldn't do it. Strong on the outside, but fragile on the inside, she didn't know how to live alone. A year later, Bill appeared. I tried to understand her. I tried to be tolerant. I was 19, and I could barely stand on my own, but I told myself that my mother deserved a chance to be happy. Bill seemed reliable, strong, confident, a little rude, but polite. He came with 2 children, Ashley and Zach. They were 15 and 13 at the time. They made it clear right away that they didn't need me. At first, I came home from college on weekends. The house was no longer the same. My room, my fortress, has become a playground for Bill's children. Computers, consoles, even table football. My books were gone, and there were some cheap toys on the shelves. "You can use the guest room," Mom said with a smile, as if she was doing me a favor. The guest room was tiny. There was a narrow bed, a stool instead of a chair, and a small window that barely let in any light. I tried to smile. I pretended that everything was fine with me. Silently, she took out her old stuffed animals from the trash, diaries written over the years, and discarded them as unnecessary trash. "Mom, where are our photos?" I asked one day, looking into the living room. The walls were empty, white, and featureless. "Bill thought it would be weird," she replied, not even looking up from the magazine. "You understand, don't you? It's time to move on." I understood. I just felt more and more that my family had left with my father. Mom was melting into her new life. I was no longer her priority. Ashley and Zach were pushing me out like roots pushing through an old foundation. They ridiculed my style of dress, my attempts to establish a relationship. They openly despised me, and my mother was silent. "Oh, look who remembered where her house is," Ashley taunted every time I arrived. "Do you still work in this? How is it, real estate?" "That's cute," Zach grinned. Bill, of course, did not lag behind. He was never outright rude, but his every phrase was prickly. "Real estate agent, Are you playing dollhouse? We have a real job here. At dinner, he joked. Ashley rolled her eyes. Zach snorted. Mom ate in silence, as if nothing was happening. I sat with my back straight, pressing my nails into my palms until there were no marks. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to be accepted. Everything was going according to plan, until one of the dinners. When I arrived for Christmas, Ashley suddenly said, "It must be convenient when Mom helped you get a job at an agency. Some of us earn our own money." I put down my fork. All the anger I'd been swallowing for years rose up in a ball. "Are you serious?" I laughed. 40 hours a week, screenings, cold calls, clients who break down, commissions. You call that pelp? Well, you've always been special, she hissed. And you've always lived at someone else's expense, I replied. You're 26 now, Ashley. When was the last time you worked at all? Silence. Bill blushed. How dare you talk to my daughter like that? And how dare you all treat me like I'm nobody? I looked at my mom. Silently. I waited, stupidly, naively, hoping that she would say at least a word in my defense. I can't believe you could say that, Emily, she said. That's not how I raised you. At that moment, I realized that I was no longer being raised. They don't expect me anymore. I was pushed out. Gently, but decisively. And I left. I got into the car without turning around. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, hot, but not from pain. Out of rage. Because I'd been trying to please for so long. That night, for the first time in my life, I felt, I don't owe anyone anything anymore. No excuses. No visits. No conversations, strained like a rubber band on the verge of breaking. I was free. Broken, but free. And now I'm standing in my own kitchen. Raindrops are tapping on the glass. The house smells of paint, new furniture, and coffee. There are pictures of me on the fridge. Me and Dad. Me and Aunt Linda. I'm on my first day at the agency. This is my home. My space. My life. And I'm not a guest anymore. Long, sticky months of silence had passed since that quarrel at his mother's house. I did not return there for almost 6 months, not because I was busy, but because I could no longer bring myself to step onto the threshold where my childhood once lived, but where other people's voices and not my energy now reigned. My calls with my mother became rare, short, and, as always, uncomfortable. There was no warmth, no curiosity, no interest in my life. Only neutral questions, as if for show. How are you? How's work? And the silence on the other end, as soon as I tried to share something real. I was drowning in my work. She broke into business right in the morning. Screenings, meetings, calls, drafting contracts, selecting keys, dusting furniture in houses that smelled of other people's destinies. It was healing. Every new client, every signed contract reminded me that I was coping, that I could keep myself afloat without anyone's support. Sometimes in the evenings I would sit by the window with a glass of wine, watch the city lights, listen to the rain, and something inside would quietly release the old aches. One day, on a clear April day, I finally allowed myself what I had been putting off for a long time. I went to a car dealership. Not for an insanely expensive car, not for luxury for the sake of luxury, but for a dream, restrained but bright. The black Mercedes, the model that I had been eyeing back at the stage of unattainable dreams, was now standing in front of me. The interior smelled of leather and freshness, and the steering wheel fit perfectly in my hands, as if it was waiting only for me. I made the purchase with a slight tremor in my fingers and left feeling like someone new, not someone who wants to prove himself worthy, but someone who knows his worth. In the evening, I didn't hesitate to take a few pictures and posted them on Instagram. It seemed natural to me to share with the world a moment that meant a lot to me. Comments began to pour in almost immediately. congratulations, likes, emoticons. But in the midst of all this digital fuss, a couple of hours later, a call appeared. Mother's number. After months of silence. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then she clicked accept anyway. Hi, Emily, honey. Her voice was strangely sugary, as if doused with caramel. I just saw your picture. God, you're doing great. Bill, the guys, and I missed you so much. Why don't you come over for dinner? We'll just sit and chat like we used to. Just like before. Those words stung. I wish we could have been like before, but all we had before were expectations, rejection, and the feeling that I always needed to earn my place. I do not know, Mother. I began, not knowing what to say. Please, honey. Truth. We all want to fix what happened. I talked to Ashley and Zach. They feel terrible too. Just try it. For my sake. I shouldn't have agreed. My gut screamed. But there was a stupid, naive part inside, the one that still believed that love could be resurrected. I said yes. The next evening, I drove up to the house. The new Mercedes rolled gently down the old driveway. I noticed the curtain flutter in the window. A moment later, the door opened and Bill came out onto the porch. He wasn't looking at me, but at the car. His eyes narrowed, his lips curled into something like surprise, and then he forced himself to smile. Hello, Emily, he said, nodding. Well, wow, what a car you have now. This. Impressive. Thank you, I replied cautiously, leaving. It's a good day for a trip, isn't it? Bill grunted and opened the door, gesturing inside. I ran into Ashley and Zach in the hallway. Their expressions were unusually calm, without the usual squints and grins. Emily, how are you? Ashley asked, coming closer. We've been thinking a lot about this evening. It's good that you came. Zach, who usually threw barbs at me from the doorway, contented himself with a nod and a short hello. The dinner was almost theatrically polite. There were questions about my work, my agency, and my clients at the table. Mom was sitting across from me, looking at me with a smile, and I found myself wanting to believe her. There was something about the way she held my hand, the way Bill was interested in the housing market, and the way Ashley nodded in response to my stories, deliberately correct. It's like a rehearsal scene. But each subsequent visit, to which, admittedly, I began to get used, did not bring relief. I began to notice repeated notes, barely noticeable, but piercing. Mom told me how the roof leaked again during the last storm. I had to put the basin right in the living room, she complained, looking at me with some secret message. Bill said that the boiler was outdated, that the heating system was about to fail. Ashley complained about the terribly cramped bathroom, and Zach complained about the old floor, which was about to collapse. Tell me, Emily, Mom said one day, straightening the tablecloth, you probably know good contractors, right? Maybe one of your clients was doing repairs? I nodded. Yes, I know. Yes, I can recommend it. But every time there was a pause in her voice. The unspoken. The expected. One day, when I was about to leave, Mom came out onto the porch after me. I was already getting into the car when she came over and put her palm on the hood, slowly running her fingers over the smooth surface. It must be a comfortable life, right? She said softly, almost in a whisper, as if she didn't believe her own words. I felt my stomach tighten. I thought I finally understood why they were all so polite all of a sudden. Why did you suddenly need me? Because now I had something to lose. And what to give. It happened one Saturday evening when I stopped by my mom's house just for tea. It was a warm, lazy day, with the gentle sun shining through the branches of the apple trees in the courtyard. We were sitting on the veranda, me with a cup of jasmine tea, my mother with some new herbal collection, always experimenting with health. She was telling me something about a neighbor who had goats, and I listened absently, enjoying the quiet moment. And suddenly, between the lines, as if in passing, she said, "I'll be 60 in a month. I can't believe how time flies." I looked up from my thoughts. 60? Really? I smiled. That's a reason. We need to do something special. Mom paused, took a sip of tea, and her gaze became a little more searching. Well, I thought I'd just stay at home. Maybe order some food. Without too much fuss. At that moment, Bill came out of the house with a can of soda, stood at the railing and added, glancing at his mother. Although, if we're going to celebrate, then for real. 60 is no joke, after all. I do not know what exactly flashed in their gaze, but it was something like a silent exchange of signals. It's like they've had this conversation before, but without me. "I'll arrange everything," I said without thinking. "Let it be an evening that you will remember, Mom." Mom flashed a smile, but something flickered in that smile. Too fast, too revealing. Bill nodded with that expression on his face when someone is barely holding back a satisfied finally. I contacted Jessica the next day. Her restaurant in Portland was a real gem, cozy, sophisticated, with full-length windows overlooking the river, soft lighting, and a slight scent of lavender in the air. Jessica just laughed in response. "Oh, you want me to outdo myself, don't you? I'll make everyone gasp." "I want my mom to feel special," I replied, clutching the phone as if trying to convey all this sincere concern through it. "The birthday that says, 'You are important, you are loved.'" But the restaurant was just the beginning. Deep down, I still dreamed of reconciliation. To get closer, to regain what was lost, not in words, but in deeds. So I decided to arrange another surprise, a family trip to Hawaii. I started planning it in secret, booking tickets, browsing villas and resorts. The beach, the warm sand, the sound of the surf, it seemed like the perfect place for us to become a family again for at least a couple of weeks. At least we tried. A few days later, Mom sent me a guest list. When I opened it, something tightened in my chest. Of the 30 names, 25 belonged to Bill's family, his sisters, nephews, and a second cousin whom I had never spoken to in my life. Aunt Linda wasn't there. No Uncle Jim. Not Todd, my cousin, with whom we used to build huts in the garden when we were kids. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened a new message and just added, plus Linda Harper, Jim Harper, Todd Harper. No comments. I knew Mom would notice. But I also knew they had to be there. They are my real family, even if my mother decided to erase them from the circle of importance. When I called Aunt Linda, she was surprised at first. "Emily? God, I'm so glad to hear from you. Everything is fine." "It's okay, Aunt. I wanted to invite you to my mom's birthday party. I'm throwing a party in Portland. Everything's going to be beautiful." She was silent for a couple of seconds, then cautiously said, "Your mom, she hasn't been in touch for a long time. After your father's funeral, it was like she cut everything short. I wasn't even sure if you remembered us." "Of course I remember," I whispered. "And I want you to be there." "We'll be there, honey. Thanks for remembering." On the eve of the holiday, I came back to my mom to discuss the latest details. There was an unusual fuss in the house. Ashley was sitting on the couch with a laptop, and Zach was hovering over the refrigerator. Bill was fixing something in the garage, banging loudly with a hammer. Everything looked strange, collected. It was as if they were waiting for something big. I had just entered when Ashley raised her head and asked with deliberate lightness, "So, the party at the restaurant is a gift, right? Or did you come up with something else?" I smiled. "Let's just say, there will be a surprise." I didn't want to go into details. I wanted everything to happen at the right moment. Clear. From the heart. The word surprise sounded like a starting pistol shot. Everyone suddenly became animated. Bill invited me to the garage to show me how worn out the shelves were and how it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to work in such conditions. Even the roof is leaking here. Do you see these spots? No matter how many times I patch it up, it's useless. I nodded, not knowing why he was saying this. Then we went to the kitchen, where Mom was telling us how crowded everything had become. Sometimes I can't even find a place to put new towels. Can you imagine? At that age, and without a proper space. Zach broke into the conversation complaining about the bathroom. Ashley and I share the same bathroom. It's a nightmare. Especially in the morning. I tried to change the subject, but they cleverly brought it back to housing, renovation, and the aging of the house. Their gazes increasingly became insistent, expectant. As if they were waiting for me to suddenly say, you know, I'm going to buy you a new house. Mom, at some point, just sat down next to me and put her hand on my knee. You're so successful, Emily. You're all right. Only you can give us a new beginning. Present. We're a family. I smiled. But the cold shadow was already moving in his soul. They weren't interested in me, they were interested in what I could give them. House, car, status, trip. Everything except what I wanted most of all, simple, sincere love. The air seemed different that morning. Spring was already in full swing, but the cool breeze from the river brought a slight nervousness. I woke up early, without needing an alarm clock. The body itself knew how important this day was. A day that I walked towards with hope, trepidation, and a lot of naivety. The day I dreamed that everything would be different. I arrived at the restaurant long before the guests. As promised, Jessica has created real magic: champagne, colored tablecloths, crystal glasses, candles flickering with soft light, and the scent of fresh flowers and vanilla in the air. The light penetrated through the glass walls, reflecting in the river, creating the illusion that we were inside an animated watercolor. I walked around the room, checking every detail. On one of the tables, in the center, there was a gift box with a gold ribbon. Inside are first-class tickets to Honolulu, vouchers for a 2-week stay at a luxury resort with ocean views, guided tours, dinners, and everything that could make a vacation a dream. It was not just a gift, it was my gesture, my bridge to the love that I missed so much. I wanted them to feel that despite everything, I was still ready to be a part of this family. I wanted my mom to see that I was still her daughter. The first guests began to arrive. The first were Linda, Jim, and Todd. We hugged so tightly that my chest tingled. There was the same warmth in their eyes that I remembered from childhood, not ostentatious, not forced, but real, quiet, like old photographs. We laughed, remembering Dad, how he made bird feeders, how he danced with Mom in the kitchen, holding her hands, as if the world was disappearing. Their presence made me feel calmer. They were an anchor in this sea of unpredictability. And then they came. Bill's family burst in like a storm, loud laughter, back slaps, and the clink of jewelry. His sister, Janet, brandished a designer handbag as if she were showing off a trophy. The nephew's children ran between the tables, and Ashley and Zach pretended not to notice anyone except their own. They immediately took the best seats, those with a view of the river, and pushed the father's family to the far tables, almost against the wall. I wanted to step in, but Mom still hadn't shown up, so I decided to wait for her. When she finally came in, I felt like everything inside was frozen. She looked immaculate in a navy blue dress, with coiffed hair, and pearl earrings that her dad had once given her. She was smiling. Until I noticed Aunt Linda. Her eyes darkened, and her lips twitched. "What are they doing here?" she whispered, coming closer to me. There was no confusion in her voice, but annoyance. I didn't invite them. This is your family, Mom, I replied softly. They wanted to be with you on your day. And that's what I wanted too. We'll talk about it later, she snapped and headed for the table, her face smiling again, like a mask put on in a hurry. The evening started beautifully. The dishes were served like clockwork, the waiters moved noiselessly, the music flowed with a light jazz wave. But it wasn't the birthday boy who was in the spotlight from the very beginning. No. Bill was the center of attention. One by one, his relatives raised their glasses. To the man who became the foundation stone of this family. Janet announced, holding the wine glass like a baton. To the man who replaced the real father to the children, someone from a distant relative added, and my chest turned cold. I noticed Aunt Linda squeezing Uncle Jim's hand under the table. He wanted to say something, but she shook her head. I swallowed the wine, and it burned, but it didn't save me. I was hardly mentioned. Even Mom didn't say a word about who had arranged all this. I sat at the table, feeling my illusion melting away. The illusion of family. The illusion of reconciliation. The illusion that I'm really welcome here. When the music stopped, I stood up. My heart was pounding in my temples. I picked up the box. Mom, I began, my voice trembling, but I managed. You always said you wanted to see the world. I dreamed of adventures. I've been thinking a lot about how to please you. And I handed her the box. I decided to give you and the whole family something special. Mom took the gift. Slowly she untied the ribbon and removed the lid. I saw her eyes fall on the tickets. A moment of silence. And instead of a flash of joy, it was cold. Impenetrable, icy. Vacation? She said it with emphasis, and the words sounded like a reproach. Do you think that's what we need? Bill jumped up. His face turned red, and his brows drew together. Are you serious? Stop it. He hissed. We've been hinting all year. We talked. You know what she really wanted. She wanted a house. Ashley shouted, standing up. A new house. You selfish witch, haven't you heard? I was standing with a box in my hands. And suddenly everything became clear, painfully clear. It was a performance. Beautifully acted, with lines and pauses. They didn't want a family. They wanted benefits. You're a real estate agent, Bill said through his teeth. Did you? I paused so as not to scream. Did you expect me to give you a house? Of course, Mom said, finally joining the conversation. All these conversations, your successful life, your car. We thought you'd understand. I put the box back on the table. Jess, I said, turning to my friend at the counter, please call security. Mom screamed. You can't do this. It's my birthday. I looked at her with a kind of quiet sadness. Not anymore. And you don't deserve all this. The guards came quickly. The scene that unfolded was scary and ridiculous. Screams, reproaches, curses. Ashley was yelling something about envy. Zach was making incoherent accusations. Mom just stood there, shaking her head, as if I had betrayed her. When they left, the restaurant was plunged into a ringing silence. I felt my body tremble, but there were no tears. Only emptiness. And suddenly Uncle Jim stood up. He raised his glass. I think it's time to remember the real man of this family. John Harper. The great father. He would have been proud of his daughter. We spent the rest of the evening talking about Dad. About his kindness, about how he knew how to listen, laugh, and be around. I looked at the faces around me and realized, this is my family. Quiet, sincere, real. And I don't need any other one anymore. After that ill-fated evening full of screams, accusations, and harsh words that could no longer be returned, the city became quieter. Or maybe I've become quieter. It was as if someone inside me had turned off the sound with a click, like a lamp. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, I felt no anxiety. There was no pain, no anger. Just an unaccustomed emptiness, flat and smooth, like a morning mist over a river. I deleted their numbers from my phone without hesitation. No messages, no calls. Blocking. It was like cutting the last ropes that held the ship that had been dragging me to the bottom for years. And instead of feeling guilty, I experienced liberation. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to pretend. There was no need to guess what I had done wrong. I was just there. One. But it's intact. Almost immediately, I canceled my Hawaii reservation. Abruptly, without regret. I looked at the confirmation pages, at the routes, at the photos of the beaches, and I felt the illusion that I had so diligently sculpted disappear. I didn't want those days filled with sun and sea to belong to people who couldn't even accept my unconditional love. Instead, I did something else. I started planning a Mediterranean cruise for Aunt Linda, Uncle Jim, and Todd. They didn't ask, they didn't hint, they didn't wait. But they were there when I needed them. There were times when others turned away. I wanted to thank them. I wanted them to have memories of something wonderful too. About the sunsets over the islands, about the sound of the waves, about the serenity that is so rare to find in life. I sent them a message with the reservation attached. I know you'll say it's too much, but please accept this as my gift. I'll feel better if you go. Aunt Linda called first. Her voice was trembling. Emily, we don't know what to say. We're just glad you're back with us. I've always been with you, Aunt, I whispered, looking out the window at the dripping rain. Uncle Jim joined in, muttering, well, if we're already old, then at least we'll see the world while the dice are being held. We laughed. And that laugh was warm and honest. It's like something from my childhood, from a time when everything was simpler. It took a little over 3 weeks before she showed up again. The phone rang at 10 in the morning. The number was familiar, but not saved. I knew who it was. I stared at the screen for a long time before swiping my finger. Hello? Emily. Mom's voice was unusually even. No irritation, no confusion. Just something prickly, like sandpaper, hidden under a thin veil of indifference. We need to talk. About what exactly? About what happened. And yet, Zach had an accident. Nothing serious, but the car was damaged. Repairs are expensive. We thought, since you're doing so well. I laughed. For real. Not from joy, but from the absurdity. The laughter burst out on its own, as if from pressure that had been held back for too long. I sat on the edge of the couch, holding the phone to my ear. Mom, I said softly, you're not calling me to apologize. Not to talk. You're calling to get something back. That's not true, she said quickly. It's just, family helps family. Really? I couldn't contain my sarcasm. Then where was your help when I was being chased out of my own house? When my things were thrown away, when my photos disappeared from the walls? Where were you when I needed at least a word of support? She was silent. I could hear her breathing, steady and cold. You never stood up for me, Mom. I never stopped Bill, I never stopped Ashley or Zach. You just sat there and watched. And now you expect me to sympathize? You're saying I didn't do anything for you, she whispered, and a crack finally appeared in her voice. Did you? Tell me, what have you done since Dad died? I graduated from college myself. I found a job myself. She built her own career. I bought the house myself. The only time you were interested in my life was when you hoped to get something from me. I'm your mother," she exclaimed, and it sounded like a blow on glass. "And I'm your daughter," I replied. "But that doesn't mean you have a right to me. You lost me the moment you let others destroy my place in this family. I don't have to prove my love to you anymore. Do you really want to cross us all out?" Her voice was trembling. "Bill, Ashley, Zach. Me? I'm not crossing it out. I'm letting go," I said. "Because I don't want to live in expectation of pain anymore. I don't want to be loved for gifts or money. I want to be accepted or left." She stopped talking. I could hear her breathing heavily, as if she was carrying a burden she had put on herself. Then, she finally said, "You've made your choice." "Yes." And he was right. "Goodbye, Mom." I turned off the call and blocked the number. Then she sat in silence for a long time. It was still drizzling outside, and the coffee was cooling on the table. I picked up the photo from the party, the one where I'm standing with Aunt Linda, Uncle Jim, and Todd, and we're all smiling. Really sincere. No masks, no conditions. It was into this silence, where there are no more voices dictating to me what I should be, that the truth came. The truth is that love is not measured in square meters, does not depend on the number of gifts, and does not live in a house where you are not expected. She lives in the voices that hear you, in the hands that hold you, in the people who stay close, just because they want to. I haven't lost my family. I found her. Just not where I expected. There was silence after that last conversation with Mom. Not anxious, not tense, as it used to be, when silence hung in the air like an unresolved conflict. No. It was a real, peaceful silence. A silence in which no reproaches were hidden. In which there were no expectations, no tiptoeing steps, no impending explosion. It was the silence of liberation. Mom didn't call again. No text messages, no voice messages, or even indirect attempts to contact someone. None of them, not Bill, not Ashley, not Zach, reminded of themselves. They disappeared, as if the whole story was a prolonged dream. And every day I realized more and more clearly that nothing terrible had happened. I didn't destroy the family. I just stopped impersonating her. My days were filled with work again. In the morning, I brewed coffee, turned on music, and sat down at my laptop to process applications, prepare presentations, and plan screenings. I met with clients, showed them houses, listened to their dreams, and helped them make them come true. I had done all this before, but now there was no more pain in these matters. There was no nagging background against which the voice of doubt had sounded before. "You're not good enough." I was no longer trying to prove my worth to anyone. I was just living. On weekends, I began to visit Aunt Linda more often. Her house stood on the edge of a small suburb, surrounded by apple trees and an old white fence, the paint on which was peeling in places, as if to remind her that perfection is not always the goal. We were sitting on her veranda, where chairs creaked and the wind played with the curtains. We drank tea with honey, ate blueberry pie, and just talked. Not about big topics, not about politics, not about drama. We were remembering our childhood. They laughed at the stories about Dad, about how he once built a birdhouse, but all the birds preferred the neighboring tree. Or how he mixed up flour with sugar and baked the tastiest cupcakes in history. He was always in a hurry to live, my aunt once said, looking up at the sky, as if he knew he wouldn't have time for a second attempt. I listened, absorbing every word like water in a desert. These memories were my anchors, what connected me to who I am. And it was during these evenings that I realized that family is not those who count how much you have given, and those who remember who you were, even when you forget yourself. Uncle Jim turned out to be a real storehouse of unexpected advice. He wasn't verbose, but his rare phrases hit the nail on the head. "The main thing in life, Emily," he said one day, pouring himself a lemonade, is not to forget who stood by you when you had nothing. The money is coming. People don't always. Todd, my cousin, has become almost like the older brother I never had. We started meeting for lunch, discussing life, work, and sometimes just driving somewhere in silence, listening to old music. He didn't ask too many questions. He didn't try to pry into my pain. He just was. And that was enough. I realized how long it had been since anyone had accepted me without looking back. Without a list of merits, without ifs and buts. Just because I am me. With all my difficulties, stubbornness, fatigue, and dreams. They didn't want new homes, vacations, or status gifts from me. They were just happy to have me around again. And there was more love in these meetings, in this tacit acceptance, than in dozens of ostentatious dinners with my mother and her new family. I often thought about Dad. I imagined how he would sit next to me, how he would laugh, watching me argue with Aunt Linda about the recipe for apple pie. I imagined how he would nod approvingly if he found out that I refused to be comfortable, refused to give myself to people who knew me only as a means. I do not know if he would have been proud of me or not, but I finally felt proud of myself. Sometimes I had dreams in which my mother called and asked for forgiveness. She said, I was wrong. And in those dreams, I felt like everything inside was softening, like I was ready to forgive. But when I woke up, I knew that even if she had called, nothing would have changed. Because her love was always conditional. And I didn't want any more conditions. One evening, when I was sitting on the porch of my house, wrapped in a plaid, watching the sunset over Greenwood, a simple but deep feeling came to me. I'm at home. Not just physically, not just in these walls with coffee-scented mornings and curtains swaying in the wind. I'm at home, inside myself. In a place where there's no more pain from not being good enough. Where there is no fear of being ousted again. Family is not blood. It's not a last name. These are not debts or reproaches. Family is the hand that is extended to you when you fall. It's the voice that says, I'm here, even if you didn't ask for anything. They are eyes that have no greed in them. It's a laugh that stays when everything else goes away. These are people who accept you completely, with all the scars, losses, mistakes. I stopped hoping that love should be earned. I stopped looking for her where she had never been. And there was no bitterness in this discovery, but peace. I've already earned love. Just because I am. And because there were those who saw enough in it,